So welcome. Good morning. This is the beginning of a half day of orientation for the 56th session of the Commission for Social Development. So I first want to apologize if much of the material you hear and see you are already familiar with, because this first session is meant to be a general orientation to engagement at the UN. What does UN stand for? Why do people still confuse it with US? And other things of this nature. After that brief orientation, not so brief perhaps, depending on how Eileen decides to take us through, we'll have more time to get to know each other, and there will be more and more people as our colleagues and friends trickle in from various forms of transportation that in this developed country often don't work. So as they come in, we will be able to meet more and more of them. I see 3 just walking in now, which is fantastic. Hi, everybody. So after this first orientation to the UN in general, we'll have some time to get to know each other a little better, think about 2 truths and a lie, other things of that nature. And then around noon, we'll begin an orientation to this particular commission, the 56th session of the Commission for Social Development. And we'll be joined by a colleague from the mission of Iceland. His name is Vardi. He's very nice. And he will be sharing with us a little bit from the perspective of the Bureau. And for those who don't know what a bureau is, you are in the right place. Because by the time you leave, you'll say, of course I've known Bureau all my life. So with that, I think I'll just introduce, hi, I'm Dan. I am a representative of the Baha'i International Community to the UN, but in this context, I chair the NGO Committee for Social Development. And you're going to get used to this because there's an NGO committee, there's the commission, there's a forum, there's all kinds of different things that have different meanings. So for those of you for whom English is your first language, it's going to be difficult. For those for whom English is the second or third or fourth language, I wish you luck. But with that, this is Eileen Riley. She is the Vice Chair of the NGO Committee for Social Development, and she is very experienced in terms of giving this particular presentation. So any question you have, she is ready for it. So with that, I'll turn the floor over to Eileen, and good morning again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you. How many people thought a bureau was a piece of furniture that you put your clothes in? Okay, we'll get to that. Before we begin this morning, I'd like to invite the rest of our executive committee to introduce themselves. Tavi,
the chair of the frNGO.
Okay, and we have a few other members who couldn't be here today. All right, so if I use any jargon or abbreviations that you don't understand, wave at me frantically and I'll try to interpret them for them, because that's a real occupational hazard here, that we talk in abbreviations and jargon and acronyms. So stop me at any time. Okay, so the NGO Committee on Social Development is happy to welcome you to this orientation today. First little piece of trivia, when we talk about the committee or the Commission on Social Development, we call it CSOC-D. Okay, why CSOC-D? Because CSD got there first. That was the Commission on Sustainable Development. And even though they don't exist anymore, we still have stuck with CSOC-D. So if you hear people talking about CSOC-D, they're talking about us. So the committee is here to promote the work of the Commission on Social Development, to promote your involvement in it. And we have a few starting points. The first one is that every person, every people, every nation has a part to play. The second one is that we are dedicated to promoting people-centered development, and that means the voice of civil society, the welfare of people, and our role in reminding states to do what they said they were going to do. So you'll be seeing the committee in several manifestations as the week goes on. Today's orientation is the first one, and we'll talk about the others later. Okay, so tomorrow morning we're about to begin the 56th Commission for Social Development. I think you know that the theme for this year's meeting is up there, Strategies for Eradicating Poverty to Achieve Sustainable Development for All. As always, we want to encourage you to engage with social media. So if you are on Twitter, there's a couple of handles there. Hashtag CSOCD56, hashtag SDGs. What are SDGs?
Social development goals.
All right, Sustainable Development Goals. So hashtag SDG, hashtag global goals. Little pet peeve of mine, don't call them global goals. The word sustainable is the most important part of these goals. So they can use their hashtag global goals, but I encourage you to stay with SDGs, Sustainable Development. So it's always this size. Even if you don't have a suit coat, you can carry it in your pocket wherever you go. But you'll always see it printed this way, and that's why. Okay, so the UN Charter sets out what this organization is all about, and the three first words are the most important words. We, the peoples. It does not say we, the member states. It does not say we, the countries. It does not say we, the nations. It says we, the peoples. And that's deliberate. So we need to hold on to that and use our voice to live up to that call to we, the peoples. And it sets out, the Charter sets out 4 purposes for the United Nations. Save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Remember, it was 1945. We had just seen the scourge of war 2 times. And the thing goes on to say that. The second one, reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights. Establish conditions for justice and respect for treaties and law. And then finally, promote social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. So that's where we find ourselves in CSOCD, in that 4th purpose of promoting social progress and better standards of life in larger freedom. The UN Charter then goes on and says to do those 4 things, for these ends, they will employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social development of all people. So it puts the goal of this commission squarely there in the founding charter of the United Nations. And then it spells it out even more specifically in Article 55, where it talks about how we're going to do that. How are we going to have this international economic and social cooperation? We're going to have higher standards of living, full employment, conditions of economic and social progress, solutions of international economic, social, health-related problems, and universal respect for human rights. So it's all spelled out here. And what the next 10 days at the commission meeting are about is putting flesh on those lofty goals. Just a little more history, and that is that in 1995 in Copenhagen was the first World Summit for Social Development. At that time, in 1995, it was the largest gathering of world leaders that had ever happened. There have been larger ones since then, but as of 1995, that was the largest gathering. And at that gathering, which you will hear people just say Copenhagen, and presume that you know that that means this World Summit for Social Development in 1995 in Copenhagen. It's another one of our shortcuts. At that gathering, governments reached a new consensus on the need to put people at the center of development. So you heard that in our committee statement, and you're going to hear it in the UN workings, that people are at the center of development. And at that World Summit in '95, they pledged to make the conquest of poverty, the goal of full employment, and the fostering of social integration the overriding objectives of development. Okay, remember those three things, because when we look precisely at the work of the Commission, you're going to see the fostering of social integration with all kinds of different groups that are looking for social integration. We already heard in the theme about the eradication of poverty. So Copenhagen, as they call it, laid out that this is the purpose of social development, and ever since 1995, we've been figuring out how to work that out. So the Commission of Social Development, which is one of the commissions of ECOSOC, another thing you're going to hear as you walk around these halls, ECOSOC, what does that stand for? Economic,
social,
okay, economic and social. And the Commission on Social Development works on a program of a 2-year cycle. So on the odd-numbered years, like 17, they review the things for consideration, and then on the even-number years, like 18, we're into a policy year, and we're into, hopefully, setting some concrete proposals for what the policy would look like. So that's the pattern for the Commission. Whoops, did I go the wrong way? Sorry. Okay, now we're down to the Bureau. So in UN speak, the Bureau is the team of people, usually 5, representing the 5 geographic areas of the world, that manage or chair a commission. So here's the Bureau for CSOC-D for 2018. I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce any of those names, but if you look at the countries they're from, you'll see that they're from Europe, Western Europe, Africa, Eastern Europe, Asia, and Latin America and the Caribbean. Okay, so the 5 geographic areas are represented by those 5 people who make up the Bureau. They will be chairing the proceedings, they will be monitoring the negotiations and so forth. Yes, Beth?
So I noticed one of these names, Eileen, has HE in front of it, and I'm wondering what that means, and are these people ambassadors, or are they staff, or what?
Great question. HE means His Excellency. So, as far as I know, he's not the main ambassador. He must be the deputy?
He's a DPR.
Yeah, okay, he's the deputy ambassador, so he gets that title. The others are staff people that work in those various missions, but they're not the ambassadors. Yes, good question. Okay, so there's the Bureau, and these are also, as I said, the people who'll be chairing the negotiations on the various proposals that will be considered. And we have reached an agreement with them that at least one of them will be at our morning briefings every morning. We'll talk more about those in a minute, but that's the good news, that they're going to be around. Okay, that's the Bureau, 5 members. The Commission has 46 members. Again, they're broken down geographically, but according to the populations of those areas. So the African states get 12, the Asian states get 9, Eastern Europe gets 5, Latin America and the Caribbean 10, Western Europe and other states. Those of you from the United States or Canada, where do you fit into this scheme here? Okay, other states, that's us. We're not used to being designated in other states. It's good for us. So there are 46 members. Again, the entire list is on the website. If you want to see if the country that you're from or have concerns about is on the Commission, the entire list is available, and it's broken down that way by those various geographic areas. Okay, we mentioned before that the theme for 2018 is strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all. And in part 2 of this orientation, we'll get into more about what that means and so forth. Okay, so during the commission, I just want to alert you to all the elements of the commission and how you can be involved, all the elements of the week rather, and how you can be involved in helping to make those happen. So the first element is the morning briefings. Now, if you've looked at the schedule of the commission, you know that in some days the commission is meeting as a whole and doing their business. In other days, there's informal consultations, there's no formal meeting. So we're having briefings the days when the whole commission is meeting, which days are Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week, and Wednesday next week. So our morning briefings will be those 5 days. The briefings are a great opportunity to meet those members of the Bureau, to meet other NGO reps that are present, to do some networking, and to hear what's going on. What happened yesterday at the commission meeting, what needs to be explored a little bit more. So I really would encourage you to come. Although they do start at 9:15, which can make your day long. They're going to be in conference room D. I won't even attempt to explain where that is, but once you get into the UN, ask anybody and they'll tell you. Okay, so morning briefings are the first element of this whole thing that we want to talk about. The second element is during the course of the commission, there will be 4 different high-level panels. These high-level panels are usually great opportunities to get some input on the various issues under discussion. So the first one is on the main theme, the eradication of poverty. The second one is on innovation and interconnectivity, which is the emerging theme. The third one is on the plan of action for aging, one of those social groups that we're trying to include. And the fourth one, similarly, is on the mainstreaming of disability. So those panels are great opportunities. Just to give you one sample, tomorrow, the panel in the afternoon will be on the priority theme. And I've just put up here who you can expect to hear from to give you a sense. So the keynote speaker is Juan Samavia, who has been the Director General of the ILO, has been around these hallowed halls for years and years and years, is a UN person, if you will. The next 2, the Vice President of Costa Rica and the Minister from Egypt, are country representatives. And then the last 2 are representatives of what we call civil society or NGOs. So I just want you to see the span of the speakers that you can expect at any one of the panels. And again, these names are all on the website and you can look at the panel that you're interested in. But it's just to give you a sense of the scope. On a related note, when you're listening to those panels, or when you're just listening to the general discussion, or when you're making your way around, I would encourage to pay close attention to who's speaking, because it makes a difference. So, when the floor is open for the general discussion, members representing the various negotiating groups, G77 plus China, G20, the European Union, etc., we'll get into those in a minute, they get to speak first. But if I'm not paying attention and I just hear, this is the ambassador from France, and I don't take note that he's speaking for the whole EU, it makes a difference. Okay, so as somebody's speaking, you want to say, are they speaking for their country alone, or are they speaking for a whole large negotiating group? And then I would encourage you, you probably all came here with an issue or two in your mind that your organization works with, that you're interested in, that you want to follow. So you want to listen for issues like gender, climate, human rights, aging, disability, whatever. What are various people saying about your issue? Because that's what's going to matter as these proposals are refined and hopefully come to fruition. So just a few little practical things like that. Okay, those alignments or those negotiating groups, there are many, but here are a few of the ones that you'll hear most frequently. The first thing you have to know is that they overlap. So it's not like you belong to one of these negotiating groups. If I'm one of the least developed countries, LDCs, I might also be from a landlocked developing country, an LLDC. Or I might also be from a small island developing state, SIDS. So you need to start to get the sense of these negotiating groups. The largest one is G77 in China. Anybody know how many members there are in G77 in China? It's not 78. Anybody? What?
143.
That's all the way up there.
It's way up there. I don't even know if I know the latest count. Monica, would you say 153?
Yeah,
23? Okay, I thought I heard 38. Anyway, G77 is an organization of developing states. They never changed the name even though they've grown. So G77, you would think it was 77 countries. It's not. The European Union's pretty obvious. JUSCANs, Japan, US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. That's another one of the negotiating groups. And then the others that we already mentioned. Now, as I said, this is just a sampling, but I would really encourage you to pay attention to who they are and see who's speaking for them. Yes?
Wikipedia says that it's 134 members.
134, thank you. Okay. All right, thank you. So, the next part of this week as we go on is that there are innumerable number of side events. Side events are not official parts of the commission meeting, but they're smaller gatherings on various topics that some people in this room are sponsoring, some UN agencies are sponsoring, some member states are sponsoring. The calendar of all of them is on the website. A few little tips if you're looking at this calendar. If the side event you're going to is in a room with a letter, A, B, C, D, those rooms are pretty small. So if you really want to go to that event, I would encourage you to get there early because once the capacity is reached, you might not get in. So just know, letter rooms are small, number rooms are a little larger. Not huge, but a little larger. So you'll see 7, you'll see 11. They're a little larger, but watch out for those letter rooms because they can trick you up. A very few of them say by invitation only, but you really need to pay attention to that, and they probably have already required an RSVP, which if you're just finding out about, you didn't do. So it's just something to be aware of and sensitive to. And then the last column on the schedule of side events, it says who the organizer is. So when you're looking at the name and the organizer, again, it might help you to get a sense of what to expect. So for example, there's one called Leaving No One Behind, a length on practices that strengthen inclusivity and poverty alleviation. Okay. And the organizer is the DPI NGO youth representatives. So it's probably going to have a youth perspective. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I'm just saying looking at the organizer of the event gives you sometimes a little insight into what to expect when you're trying to make decisions. So for example, tomorrow afternoon at the lunchtime break, there are 5 side events. You're going to have to choose one. So, figure out how to choose the one. If it's in a letter room, go early and look at who the organizer is. Okay. I just want to go back for a second. Okay, so we talked about morning briefings. We didn't talk about the opening business. Tomorrow morning when the commission begins at 10 o'clock, they do the typical things that groups do. They elect officers, they approve the agenda. There's some mechanical stuff that has to go on. It's not too exciting. We know who the Bureau is already, but they'll be formally elected tomorrow. And then, following that, there will be some introductory statements by high-level UN folks, which can be very, very interesting. So I would encourage you to pay attention to that part of it. Then the high-level panels we already mentioned, the general discussion. Following the high-level panels, the floor is open for a general discussion. Those negotiating groups get to talk first, individual nations get to talk second, and perhaps a few NGOs will get to talk. But it's, the UN is very clear that it's a member state organization, and so the member states get first dibs on those speaking slots. Okay, the networking reception. One of my colleagues is going to say a little bit about that.
Thank you, Eileen. We have planned a reception for this Thursday in this room from 6 until 8. It's an opportunity for you to meet in a very informal atmosphere with other people who have been attending the commission. And we have this every year. It's well received. A lot of you have already registered for it, so we're looking forward to seeing you there. And again, it's in this room from 6 until 8.
Is it too late to register?
Registration is closed, but you can still come.
Okay, now we're down to Civil Society Forum. Until this year, the commission meeting usually started on a Wednesday, and usually on the day or two preceding that Wednesday, Monday and Tuesday, we had this kind of orientation and we had a forum. The commission shifted its schedule this year. They begin on a Monday, so that gave us a challenge to how to get the orientation in. So all of you are coming out on a Sunday, God bless you, and how to get the forum in. So when we looked at the commission schedule, we saw that Friday they had no formal business. So that would be a good day for us to have our NGO forum because we won't be interfering with anything that's going on there. So this Friday, February 2nd, we will be hosting the NGO forum, which is really an opportunity for you to look at the draft declaration that is being proposed by civil society, to have some time with each other in regional groupings to talk about the needs of your regions and what's going on there. So it's a really great opportunity, and however, as was mentioned, if you're not signed up, it's a problem because security is pretty tight across the street and you won't be able to get in if you're not registered. How many people are registered for that forum? Most everybody here? Great. Oh.
Can I still volunteer? I speak for preventers. Can I volunteer as a translator or something like that?
Somebody help me out here. I'm afraid.
Why doesn't she meet with Marie and Lynn during the break? And we can discuss that. It seems like a very personal issue, and we can sneak you in under somebody's jacket.
Cynthia Summers is handling the translators for registered. No, don't say anything?
Let's wait.
Yeah, we don't want to get into that. Okay. All right, so yes.
If I already have credentials for the week, can I use that same credential to go to the forum?
Yes. Okay, and then the last element that I listed here during the commission is next Wednesday, when it all wraps up, that will be the time when the whole commission will be back together in room 4, and we'll be approving or not these proposals that we've been working on in terms of poverty eradication, in terms of aging, and so forth and so on. So that will be the climax of the whole thing. Right now, it's scheduled to happen Wednesday morning, but it does say Wednesday afternoon if needed. So as you can imagine, the negotiations can go on and on and on and on. So we can't guarantee it'll be over Wednesday morning, and they have put that little cushion in. One thing I meant to say earlier is that if you're new to things around the UN, the schedule is always 10 to 1 and 3 to 6. So when UN meetings happen, like the commission, it's 10 to 1, lunch break, 3 to 6. And then in that lunch break is often when we all try to squeeze in all these side events and other meetings and so forth. So that's the way that that goes. Okay, any questions about all those elements there of what you're to expect this week?
I just want to clarify that all the side events are also inside the UN.
Oh, right, all the side events, thank you, for this week are also in the UN in various rooms. One or two of them are in conference room 9, which is a huge mystery. If you want to go there, you better start about a half hour early because nobody knows where it is and it's hard to find. Just keep walking, right? But most of them are in conference room D, so that's small. 7 or 12, which are a little larger. That's where most of them are. The commission itself is in conference room 4. And when you finally get into the UN, you'll be in a big visitor's lobby, and the door to the balcony where we will be sitting of conference room 4 is right in that lobby. So that'll be easy to find. Other questions, comments? Does this all make sense? Yes, Winifred.
Eileen just mentioned about the secondary tickets.
Okay, we're going to do that whole thing of registration later. Thank you, though. I mean, it does need to be clarified. But before we get into that, because that's a thing in itself. Anybody else? Yes?
Yeah, I just want to say that the civil society for this year will just be one day, as against the normal 2 days.
No, the forum's usually only 1 day. We've done orientation in the forum, I think. Yeah.
Okay, the first day and then the following.
Yeah, so think of this as Monday and Friday as Tuesday. Okay, thank you.